What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Fish the Moment. So shout out to everyone who watched my last underwater testing video with the Swimbaits and left a like on the video. I had a goal in that video to get 1,000 likes to make another one of these, and you guys smashed that like goal out of the park. Actually hit the like goal in less than a day. So thanks to everyone who liked the video, and I'm excited to make more of these underwater testing videos for you guys. And today we're gonna be testing some deep water scrounger heads to see what the action looks like, the best retrieves, the best baits, all kinds of stuff. So let's jump into it. So for those of you who don't know what a scrounger head is, it's basically just a metal jig head with a soft plastic lip. And this lip sticks straight up in the air, comes in different sizes and shapes, and it basically just causes this bait to shimmy side to side and give the swim bait or whatever trailer you're using great action. And originally, when these scrounger heads first came out, they were not lighter sizes, like 1/8 ounce to maybe a 1/2 ounce. But now we have a lot heavier scrounger heads, all the way up to 1.5 ounces. And so these scrounger heads have been designed to fish offshore in deeper water. And so I wanted to use the Olympic-sized swimming pool I used in the last video to test what these scrounger heads look like in 13 feet of water, how we need to retrieve the bait, as well as the best trailers to use with the scrounger head in deep water. And it's something that I am really interested in because I haven't had a ton of success with scrounger heads over the years. I've caught a few fish on them, but definitely not as well as I have on other baits. And so I know this is a really good bait in the Tennessee area and also out in the Carolinas. And so I'm excited to kind of get into the test results I found, because I think I've been fishing this bait wrong this whole time, and that's why I'm not getting them in the boat. So let's jump into it. So for this video, guys, we're going back to the swimming pool where I made my last video. And if you haven't seen that video, check it out using the link in the description below. It explains how I set up this test, the methodology I used. I spent like 5 minutes at the beginning of the video explaining all of it. I don't want to get into all that again in this video. Some guys were complaining in the comments I was talking too much. So I don't want to do that in this video. I also got a lot of comments in the last video that were super helpful in terms of how I should film these underwater footage videos, as well as how I should kind of compare baits, all kinds of stuff. And so I really appreciate all the comments, and I'm gonna take all of that into account in upcoming videos. This one I actually recorded before my last video, and so we're going to just use the footage I have. I did get one other camera angle, which is gonna be pretty cool, but let's just jump straight into the test with these different baits, because I wanna get the results as fast as possible and share them with you guys. So for this video, guys, I tested several combinations of scrounger heads and baits, and I threw a 1/2 ounce scrounger head all the way up to a 1 ounce scrounger head and used several different baits. And unlike the last video, I'm gonna talk about the different brands of baits I tried. And the one I started with is the Jenko Fishing Tremor Shad. And this bait was designed to be used with a scrounger head. It has a minnow type shape with just this kind of nothing looking tail, but it's hand poured and it moves around a lot. And because this bait was designed to be thrown on the scrounger head, I definitely wanted to start with this and see what the action was like. And just like my last video that I made about the swim baits in the deep pool, one thing I found challenging was actually keeping the swim bait 2 to 3 feet off the bottom to test the action of these lures. As we saw in the last video, I was struggling to either keep that bait deep enough to be in front of the camera, or I was struggling with that bait getting too deep and just crawling on the bottom. And one thing that I found with the scrounger head, just like with the other swim baits, is that these scrounger heads don't work that great when they're just drug on the bottom. I threw several of these different baits, and I'll just put some recordings up of all these different baits going across the bottom. They do have a tiny bit of action, but really these baits shine when they're up off the bottom swimming through the water column, not when they're being drug across the bottom of the lake, the pool, whatever it is. And so just wanted to call that out to start with, because we're going to get into the retrieve for these baits a little bit later and the ideal retrieve that I think I found. And so again, the first bait I tested was the Jenko Fishing Tremor Shad. And one thing I noticed right away is that this Tremor Shad, when paired with the scrounger head, has a very violent side-to-side action when it's actually swimming through the water column. And the body of the bait will turn a ton. It doesn't have a ton of tail action, though the tail moves, but I don't think that's really the point of this scrounger head. It's really that side-to-side aggressive action that this bait gives it. And I really liked this bait not only when I was reeling it on kind of a steady retrieve, but also when I would burn that Scrounger Head, and I would cause that bait to go up in the water really fast and then fall back down. It seemed like the faster you reeled this bait down there deep, the more violent that side-to-side action was, but it still had really good action while swimming it very slowly. The next bait I tested was the Castaic Jerky J swim bait, and this bait was again designed to be thrown on a Scrounger Head, and similar to the Jenko fishing Tremor shad, you can see that this bait has a single tail and it wobbles really easily just from a small kind of shake in my hand. And this bait also has a very thin profile and same length as a Tremor shad, pretty much identical baits other than kind of the color patterns on them. And so I tested out this Castaic Jerky J and it performed very similar to the Tremor shad. And so I can see why these are kind of the two go-to baits among the offshore Scrounger Head fishermen. But you know, I didn't really see too big of a difference between them. They both perform really well. Both gave that really violent action to the Scrounger Head. And so I think that this is definitely another bait that you should check out if you want to throw a Scrounger. So the first two baits I tried were designed for the Scrounger Head, but the rest of these baits were not. They're just regular soft plastic baits I'm going to add to a Scrounger Head. And the first one is the Strike King Caffeine Shad. And I love this Caffeine Shad. It is an awesome bait. And I actually tried a little bit bigger size bait with this Caffeine Shad. This is the 7-inch Magnum Caffeine Shad. And this is a bait that I heard was catching a lot of fish on Table Rock Lake this last year. And this bait has really, really good action underwater if you're reeling it fast enough. One thing I noticed with this big bait, with this big body, is that you have to reel that bait pretty quickly to get a good side-to-side action. And I also saw that if you're throwing this big 7-inch Caffeine Shad on a light Scrounger Head, a 1/2 ounce or a 3/4 ounce, the action isn't nearly as good as when you're throwing it on this 1 ounce Scrounger. And so I really do like this big Magnum Caffeine Shad on there. It seems to work pretty well. I also feel like you could do pretty well with just a regular 5-inch Strike King Caffeine Shad, but if I was going to be throwing just a 5-inch kind of fluke or swim bait style bait, I would probably stick with the Jerky J and the Tremor shad just because they're designed specifically for the Scrounger Head. But I think that the Caffeine Shad would still get the job done. The reason that I threw this bait is just because you get that bigger profile, which might draw a few bigger bites. The next bait I tested was the Strike King KVD Swim and Shiner, and this is just a 5-inch boot tail swim bait, your kind of standard swim bait that you might see from a lot of other brands. And I kind of just wanted to test this bait to see what a traditional swim bait would look on the back of the Scrounger Head. This bait does seem to have a pretty good side-to-side action to it when I'm just moving the tail. But one thing I noticed with this Swim and Shiner is that there wasn't as much body roll from this swim bait compared to the Tremor shad and the Jerky J. Now, I'm not really sure what is causing that. I don't know if it's the boot tail that's restricting that body motion, that side-to-side motion, or if it's like the height of this bait. This bait seems maybe just a little bit taller than this swim bait. Not sure exactly what it is, don't know the physics behind it, but what I do know is that the body will turn a lot more with that Tremor shad and with the Jerky J than it does with this Swim and Shiner. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, and honestly, I feel like if you are fishing these baits, there may be a reason to go to the Swim and Shiner with a little bit less aggressive body action compared to the Tremor shad if maybe the fish are a little bit less aggressive, more lethargic, or if a lot of guys are throwing this bait. And so I thought this was kind of an interesting result just because you might be able to go to more of a boot tail style swim bait on the Scrounger Head, reduce the amount of action, but maybe get more bites when those fish are pressured. So the last swim bait that I tested was the Reaction Innovation Skinny Dipper. And this is my go-to swim bait on the back of an Alabama rig, as well as just when I'm putting a swim bait on a weightless hook or on a Texas rig and swimming it through grass. And similarly to the KVD Swim and Shiner, the amount of body roll from this Reaction Innovation Skinny Dipper was not nearly as much as the Tremor shad or the Castaic's Jerky J. And this bait actually has a little bit bigger paddle tail than that Swimming Shiner, and so I feel like the body roll on this bait was even a little bit less, but it's still a really good action. And especially when I was reeling this bait at a pretty good pace, so I'm reeling it pretty quickly, the body roll on this bait was pretty significant. So basically what I found is that you need to match the style of swim bait you put on the back of your scrounger head to how fast you're going to be retrieving the scrounger. And so if you're going to reel that scrounger head very slowly, it's better to use the straight tail swim baits like the Jerky J and the Tremor Shad, because those baits give that scrounger a little bit more action, and so when you reel them at a slower pace, it'll maintain that good body roll. But then if you're trying to reel that scrounger head faster, it's actually better to use the paddle tail swim baits like the Skinny Dipper and the Swim and Shiner, because that paddle tail will actually reduce some of the body roll and it will make the bait a little bit less aggressive on a fast retrieve. My fear, I guess, with the straight tail swim baits on a fast retrieve is that that bait is going to overturn and almost blow out one way or another, and it's not going to look very natural. So if you put that paddle tail swim bait on with that fast retrieve, the amount of body roll will be less, but it will look a lot more natural on a really fast retrieve when that head really starts turning side to side. And so I definitely see that there is a time and place to throw the boot tail swim baits on the scrounger head, as well as these kind of Tremor Shad or Jerky J style swim baits. And now that we've kind of identified the differences in the baits, I want to talk about the retrieve and the challenges I had with the retrieve for the scrounger head, as well as the retrieve that I feel like I'm going to go with in the future based on these results. So really quick, I want to let you guys know about something awesome I just added to my website. If you go to fishthemoment.com and then go to my fishing playbooks tab, you'll notice that there is something new that's on here, which is the ultimate guide to fishing rods. And this is something I've been working on for the past 6 months, and it's basically a guide to which fishing rods you should use with every single type of bait you might encounter when you go fishing. And so what I did is made charts where I broke down each fishing lure by the weight of the fishing lure, and then matched that up to the action and length of rod I use with each of those type of baits. And here's just one example here, but I list out about 15 to 20 different baits and applications, and then all their different weights. And then I summarize all of these results into these nice graphics that show you the number of applications per different type of fishing rod. And I also give you recommendations on the type of fishing rods I would purchase in terms of brand and price point. And so something that took me a lot of time to put together, and I spent quite a bit of money to actually get all the fishing rods and test them out. And so I have this on my website for sale for $20, and I do believe it's a really valuable resource that will help you guys when you're making your decisions on which fishing rods to buy. And so definitely check it out if you are in the market for new fishing rods and want to make sure that you're making the right decision when you purchase them. So as far as the retrieve goes for the scrounger head, I struggled when I first started casting this bait in the pool with either reeling the bait too fast, so it was too high above the camera, or reeling the bait too slow, so it was dragging on the bottom, killing the action of the scrounger head. And as I mentioned in my last underwater testing video, a retrieve I use with my hollow body swim baits and my paddle tail swim baits a lot is that retrieve where I will kind of cast the bait out there, let it sink to the bottom, reel the reel handler 2 or 3 times, let it fall back to the bottom, and kind of hop that bait up and down off the bottom. Now, the problem with that retrieve is that it causes that bait to move up and down really quickly in the water column. And I feel like the advantage of the scrounger head is that you can have a bait that goes slowly through the water column and has that side to side wobble. And so I don't think that you're going to really get the ideal action out of this bait if you're burning that bait through the water column, kind of like you're seeing in these clips. So you look at these clips, you can see that when I reel that bait too quickly, it almost puts too much action into that bait, and then as it falls down, the bait doesn't have that great of a side to side falling action. And so instead of doing the retrieve where you're burning the handle, bringing the bait up and down, I started testing a retrieve where I tried to keep the bait as close to the bottom of the pool as I possibly can while still keeping it up off the bottom. And to do this, I actually changed the camera angle and started casting from the deep end of the pool up into the shallow end of the pool, kind of like I would be casting up on top of a ledge. So if you think about where the camera is here, this would be the top of a ledge, and then over here would be the creek channel or off the drop. And so what I tried to do was cast that swim bait out, let it sink down to the bottom, and then barely crawl it just 1 or 2 feet off the bottom all the way over the drop and then down into deeper water. And if you look at a couple of these clips, I was pretty successful in doing this, mainly because I could actually see the bait in the pool. And so it was a little bit like cheating because I could see exactly what the bait was doing. But it was interesting to take a look at my retrieve from my GoPro that I had on my chest. And if you kind of look at this retrieve, you can notice that I'm doing a lot of slow reels. Then I'm stopping what I'm doing, stopping the retrieve, letting it sink to the bottom, and then reeling it again right when that bait hits the bottom. And I feel like this is kind of the retrieve you have to use. It's not so much of that 2 or 3 hard turns of the bait to bring it off the bottom and let it fall back down. It's more of a reel it really slow 4 or 5 times, then let it sink back down just to get back to the bottom, maintain bottom contact, then start that slow retrieve again. And so this way the bait stays almost as tight to the bottom as it possibly can while maintaining that nice side-to-side motion. And one thing I want to address, because I know I'm going to get comments on it, is the action of the swim bait in this new camera angle. If we take a look at the action of this bait as it's going across the bottom, it actually looks pretty good. The bait's moving side to side, and it seems like it has great action going across the bottom. And that's contradictory to what I had said earlier about the bait having no action when it was going across the bottom in the other camera angle. Well, one thing I want to make very clear is that the spot in the pool where I'm filming now is only 4 feet deep, and so this bait is having great action on the top of the shallow end of the pool and 4 foot of water. But as that bait drops into deeper water, 12, 13, 14 feet of water, that bait has a lot less action because I have to reel the bait a lot slower to keep it down deep. And so if we look at my retrieve here again, you can see that as the bait is coming from the shallow end of the pool to the deep end of the pool, I start with a pretty quick retrieve when it's in 4 foot of water because I don't have to reel it that slow to keep it down the bottom. But then as the pool starts dropping off from 4 foot down to 13 feet of water, I have to slow my retrieve down a ton to keep that bait close to the bottom. And I even have to stop my retrieve several times. And so this makes the action of the bait a lot less aggressive, and that's the reason why on the other camera angle, when that bait's in 13 foot of water, it has very little action when it's actually on the bottom. And so the challenge with this bait is making sure that you keep that bait close to the bottom, but are also able to reel that bait fast enough to keep that bait moving. And so that's why this kind of stop and go retrieve is mandatory, especially as this bait gets deeper and deeper into 13, 15, or 20 feet of water. And so this is the retrieve that I'm probably going to go with going forward with this Scrounger Head when I'm trying to fish it offshore. And then I'll reserve the more aggressive retrieves for the jig head with the paddle tail swim bait, because that might be a little bit better retrieve for that style bait and also works a little bit better in the summer. But I think the Scrounger Head might be a little bit better sometimes in the winter, but also could be good in the summer as well. So something I need to test out more on the water, but I'm definitely glad that I tested it in the pool first, so I at least understand how this bait looks in the water, how I might need to retrieve it, and the pros and cons of each retrieve. And so I'm really excited to keep testing different styles of baits and different retrieves in this pool. And going forward, I'm probably not going to do as many like direct bait comparisons because I feel like it's just going to go down the rabbit hole of saying one brand is worse than another, and that's never good to do, especially when you're in an industry as small as the fishing industry. But I do feel like I'm getting a lot of really great results on ways to retrieve baits in deep water based on what I'm seeing in this pool. And I'm also going to adjust the camera angles. Got some great comments about putting a pole on the side of the pool and then having someone walk down and follow the bait with a pole so we can actually follow the bait all the way through the cast. Definitely going to be doing that, and I'm just going to keep improving how I'm filming this, keep improving how I'm testing these different approaches, and I'll be taking all of your comments and suggestions into mind when I'm making these videos. So please leave a comment down below if you have something you'd like me to test, and I'll definitely make it in my upcoming trips to the pool. And again, thanks so much for all the likes on the last video. Definitely feels great to know that you guys enjoy this content and gives me confidence to keep making this going in the future. So next up, guys, I'll be making a video about my top 5 tournament fishing mistakes, and that'll be coming up on Friday, so definitely stay tuned for that video. And then I'm gonna be doing a lot more preparation for my upcoming tournaments. I just signed up for all of the BFL tournaments for the Okie division in 2020, and I'm actually looking for a co-angler to link up with. So if you plan on fishing the Okie division BFLs and are gonna be a co-angler, let me know by sending me an email to Jonny@fishmoment.com. That way we can link up, and that way I can have a guaranteed co-angler, and hopefully you can get into all the tournaments as well because of that. So I know there's a lot of stuff here at the end, but I wanted to get all that out there. And again, thanks to everyone who checked out this video. Thanks for all the comments, and I'll see y'all next one.